The cream-colored envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick and expensive between my fingers. I recognized Brittany's handwriting immediately. That precise, controlled script she'd perfected in private school, the one that always looked like it was judging you. My coffee grew cold as I stared at my name written in black ink. Mrs. Teresa Mack. Not mom, not mother, just my formal name, like I was some distant relative she barely knew. I should have thrown it away. Should have recognized the warning signs in the weight of the paper, the way my daughter's return address was embossed in gold lettering. But I was still clinging to hope then, still believing that somewhere beneath her designer clothes and cold demeanor lived the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The kitchen felt smaller as I slid my finger under the flap, the morning light filtering through my modest apartment's windows seeming somehow dimmer. I'd been living here for 3 years now, ever since Richard died and left me with more bills than inheritance. It was clean, comfortable, and mine. A sanctuary I'd built from the pieces of a life that had crumbled around me. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. Not an invitation, not a wedding announcement. An invoice. Professional wedding planning services, $35,000. Honeymoon expenses, Tuscany 3 weeks, $35,000. Total due $70,000. Payment due 30 days. At the bottom, in Brittany's careful handwriting, you should feel lucky I'm letting you contribute at all. After everything you've put this family through, this is the least you can do. I read it twice, then 3 times. The words swam before my eyes, but their meaning remained crystal clear. My daughter, my only child, was charging me for a wedding I hadn't been invited to. A honeymoon I'd never even heard about, and treating it like a privilege I should be grateful for. The coffee mug slipped from my numb fingers, shattering against the linoleum floor. Brown liquid spread across the white tiles like spilled blood, and I stared at it without moving. 27 years of motherhood, and this was what I'd earned. Not a phone call, not an invitation, not even the courtesy of a conversation. An invoice. I thought about the last time I'd seen Brittany. Christmas dinner 18 months ago at her imposing house in Westchester. She'd greeted me at the door like an inconvenience, her smile never reaching her eyes. Throughout the evening, she'd made subtle comments about my choices, my situation, my inability to move on. Her husband Wayne had mostly ignored me, and when he did speak, it was with the kind of polite condescension reserved for unwanted guests. I'd left early, claiming a headache. Brittany hadn't protested. Now, kneeling on my kitchen floor, picking up pieces of broken ceramic, I understood. I wasn't her mother anymore. I was a wallet she occasionally remembered to shake down for money. The realization should have destroyed me. Instead, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. I stood slowly, my knees protesting after 63 years of carrying the weight of other people's expectations. The invoice fluttered to the floor, and I left it there among the coffee stains and ceramic shards. Let it swim in the mess. It belonged there. Walking to my bedroom, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. Gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, lines around my eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights worrying about an ungrateful daughter. Clothes that were clean but unremarkable. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who had spent her life making herself smaller so others could feel bigger. But my eyes were different now. They held something I hadn't seen in years. Fury. I pulled out my laptop and began typing. Not a check. Not a desperate plea for inclusion. Something else entirely. My fingers moved across the keyboard with purpose, each keystroke deliberate and measured. I researched wedding venues in Westchester County, cross-referenced dates with social media posts I'd been blocked from but could still access through mutual friends. I found the resort in Tuscany, the one with the private villas and the astronomical nightly rates. By evening, I had a complete picture of my daughter's dream wedding and honeymoon. Every detail, every expense, every vendor. I poured myself a glass of wine. Not the cheap stuff I usually bought, but the good bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. I sat at my kitchen table, the invoice still on the floor where I'd left it, and made a list of phone numbers. The first call would be to Brittany's wedding planner, a woman named Christine Slaughter according to my research. Then the resort in Tuscany, then the caterer, the florist, the photographer. All of them expecting payment from someone who thought I was nothing more than a convenient ATM. I smiled, and it felt like flexing a muscle I'd forgotten I had. Brittany wanted me to contribute to her wedding. Fine. I'd contribute, just not in the way she'd imagined. I picked up my phone and dialed the first number. A woman answered on the third ring, her voice professionally warm. Slaughter Wedding Planning. This is Christine speaking. Hello, I said, my voice steady as granite. I'm calling about the Brittany Green wedding. I'm Teresa Mack, Brittany's mother. Oh, Mrs. Mack, how wonderful to finally speak with you. Brittany has mentioned you might be contributing to the wedding expenses. I have to say, she's planned something absolutely spectacular. I'm sure she has, I replied, my tone giving nothing away. I'd like to discuss the arrangements. When would be a good time to meet? Would tomorrow work? I have an opening at 2 o'clock. Perfect. I'll see you then. I hung up and reached for my wine glass. The liquid was deep red, almost the color of blood. I took a sip and felt it burn its way down my throat, warming the cold place where my heart used to be. Tomorrow I would begin to teach my daughter about consequences, about respect, about the price of treating your mother like a stranger who owed you money. The morning air was crisp as I walked into Christine Slaughter's office building in White Plains. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. A navy dress that had cost me 2 weeks' grocery budget 3 years ago, my late mother's pearl necklace, and the kind of understated elegance that whispers money rather than screaming it. I wanted to look like someone who could write a $70,000 check without blinking. Christine Slaughter's office was everything I'd expected. Cream walls, gold accents, and the kind of furniture that cost more than most people's cars. She greeted me with the practiced warmth of someone who made her living managing other people's dreams and neuroses. Mrs. Mack, please have a seat. Can I offer you coffee? Water? Coffee would be lovely, I said, settling into the plush chair across from her glass desk. Through the windows, I could see the Hudson River gleaming in the afternoon sun, and for a moment, I felt like I was looking down at my old life from a great height. Christine poured coffee from an elegant silver service, her movements fluid and rehearsed. I have to tell you, your daughter has exquisite taste. The Riverside Manor is simply stunning for an October wedding. And the details she's chosen, the hand-blown glass centerpieces, the imported Italian linens, everything is perfection. Tell me about the timeline, I said, accepting the delicate china cup. When exactly is the wedding? October 15th, just 3 weeks away. Now, of course, Brittany mentioned you might be traveling, which is why you won't be able to attend. Her tone was carefully neutral, but I caught the slight uptick at the end, a question disguised as a statement. Something like that, I replied, letting my silence speak volumes. Let her wonder. And the honeymoon arrangements? Oh, that's going to be absolutely magical. 3 weeks at Villa Arenata in Tuscany. It's a private resort, very exclusive. They're flying out the day after the wedding. Christine's eyes sparkled with the kind of vicarious excitement wedding planners cultivated. The invoice I sent over covers the upgraded villa with the infinity pool and private chef service. Invoice. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate precision. I'm afraid there's been some confusion. The sparkle in Christine's eyes dimmed slightly. Confusion. I never agreed to pay for my daughter's wedding or honeymoon. In fact, I wasn't even invited to the wedding. The words came out calm, measured, but I watched their impact register on Christine's face like ripples across still water. Oh. She blinked rapidly, her professional composure cracking. But Brittany said. She told me you were eager to contribute, that you felt terrible about missing the ceremony and wanted to make it up to her by covering the major expenses. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Did she really? How interesting. Tell me, Christine, when someone commissions your services, they sign a contract, don't they? Well, yes, of course. And who signed the contract for this wedding? Christine's face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Brittany and Wayne. But she assured me that you would be handling the payments for certain items. Items totaling $70,000. I opened my purse and pulled out the invoice, now neatly folded. This arrived yesterday. No phone call, no discussion, just a bill with a charming note about how lucky I should feel to be allowed to contribute. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Christine stared at the invoice, then at me, then back at the paper. I could practically see the calculations running behind her eyes, deposits made, vendors paid, her own commission hanging in the balance. Mrs. Mack, I had no idea. Brittany presented this as an arrangement you'd already agreed to. She seemed so confident that you would cover these expenses. Did she pay you anything upfront? A small deposit. $5,000. The rest was supposed to come from you this week, with the balance due on the wedding day. I nodded slowly, filing this information away. And what happens if those payments don't materialize? Christine's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her own coffee cup. Well, we would have to, that is to say, without payment, we couldn't provide the services. All of them. The vendors require payment before or on the day of service, the venue, the catering, the flowers, the photography, everything. Her voice was barely above a whisper now. If the payments don't come through, there would be no wedding. I sat back in my chair, letting this sink in. Brittany had built her dream wedding on the assumption that she could bully me into paying for it. She'd counted on my maternal guilt, my desperate desire to be included in her life, my history of saying yes when I should have said no. She'd counted wrong. Christine, I said, my voice gentle now, almost motherly. You seem like a lovely person, and I imagine you work very hard for your clients. This situation isn't your fault. My daughter has put you in a terrible position. What should I do? The question came out like a prayer. That depends. How much time do you need to make alternative arrangements? For a wedding of this scale, with just 3 weeks' notice. Christine shook her head. It would be impossible. The deposits alone. Most vendors don't offer refunds for cancellations this close to the event date. Even if the cancellation is due to non-payment by the client, the contracts are with Brittany and Wayne. They're legally responsible for payment regardless of family arrangements. The implication hung heavy in the air between us. I stood up, smoothing my dress. Christine, I want you to do something for me. When my daughter calls, and she will call, probably within the next day or two, I want you to tell her exactly what you told me, that without the payments I was supposedly going to make, there will be no wedding. But Mrs. Mack. And then I want you to give her my phone number and tell her that if she wants to discuss this further, she needs to call me directly. Not send invoices, not make assumptions. Call me. Christine nodded mutely, her face ashen. One more thing, I added, pausing at the door. Don't feel bad about any of this. You're not responsible for my daughter's choices or their consequences. You're a businesswoman providing a service, and you deserve to be paid for your work. Just not by me. I left her sitting there, staring at the invoice I'd placed on her desk like evidence in a criminal trial. The elevator ride down felt different from the ride up. Lighter somehow, as if I'd left some invisible burden in that office, along with my daughter's assumptions about my compliance. Outside, the October air carried the scent of dying leaves and coming winter. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't called in months. Kayla Waters had been my neighbor when Brittany was small, back when we lived in the house Richard and I had saved for years to buy. Kayla's daughter, Vincent, had been Brittany's best friend until high school, when my daughter decided that Vincent's family wasn't quite prestigious enough for her social aspirations. Kayla answered on the second ring. "Teresa, my God, it's been forever. How are you, honey?" "I'm well, Kayla. Actually, I'm better than I've been in years. Listen, I have a favor to ask. Do you still have Vincent's number? I'd like to get back in touch. Of course, she'd love to hear from you. She asks about you every time we talk. You know she's a wedding photographer now. Has her own business and everything. A wedding photographer." I smiled, feeling the pieces of my plan shift and settle into place like a puzzle finally revealing its picture. "That's perfect, Kayla. Absolutely perfect." Vincent Pratt hadn't changed much in the 15 years since I'd last seen her. Same warm brown eyes, same genuine smile that reached all the way to her soul. She'd agreed to meet me at a small cafe in Terrytown, halfway between our respective lives. And when she walked through the door, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed, the comfort of unconditional acceptance. "Mrs. Mack," she said, approaching my corner table with arms already extended. "You look wonderful." I stood to embrace her, breathing in the faint scent of vanilla perfume that transported me back to afternoons when she and Brittany would sprawl across my living room floor, painting their nails and whispering secrets. Back when my daughter still laughed freely, before she learned that love was a commodity to be rationed and withheld. "Please, call me Teresa. We're both adults now, after all." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice." Vincent settled into her seat, her photographer's eye automatically scanning the cafe's lighting and angles before focusing entirely on me. "Mom told me you wanted to discuss some kind of photography work. I have to admit, I'm curious. It's been so long since we've talked. How much has your mother told you about my situation with Brittany?" A shadow crossed Vincent's face. "Some. I know you two haven't been close lately. I'm sorry about that, Teresa. I remember how tight you were when we were kids. Do you remember why you and Brittany stopped being friends?" Vincent's laugh held no humor. "High school. She decided I wasn't sophisticated enough for her new crowd, said my family was holding her back from her potential." She traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. "It hurt at the time, but honestly, looking back, I dodged a bullet." "What do you mean?" "I've kept tabs on her through social media over the years, watched her treat people like stepping stones. Remember Tommy Brown from our graduating class? She dated him for 2 years, let him pay for everything, then dumped him the week before prom because she got asked by the quarterback." Vincent's eyes met mine. "Some people never grow out of using others, you know." The waitress brought our coffee, and I used the interruption to study Vincent's face. She'd grown into herself beautifully, confident without being harsh, successful without losing her compassion. Everything I'd hoped Brittany might become. "Tell me about your photography business," I said. "It's going well. I specialize in weddings and family portraits. There's something magical about capturing people's happiest moments, you know. Though lately," she paused, stirring sugar into her coffee, "lately, I've been getting some interesting requests. Divorce documentation, infidelity cases, people who need photographic evidence for legal proceedings." Vincent's smile turned sharp. "Turns out my eye for capturing candid moments is useful for more than just wedding bliss." I felt that familiar settling sensation in my chest, pieces clicking into place. How do you feel about photographing events where you're not exactly welcome? Vincent's eyebrows rose. You mean like crashing parties? More like documenting them from a distance, for someone who has a legitimate interest in what happens but can't be there themselves. We looked at each other across the small table, understanding passing between us like a shared secret. Vincent leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Teresa, what exactly are you planning? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken of Brittany's invoice. Vincent's expression shifted as she read, her jaw tightening with each line. $70,000 for a wedding you weren't invited to. Her voice carried the same outrage I'd felt but hadn't allowed myself to fully experience. That's beyond cruel, Teresa. That's sociopathic. I want you to photograph her wedding, from outside the venue. The Riverside Manor has extensive grounds, public areas where a photographer could work without trespassing. I leaned forward, matching her whisper. I want documentation of every moment, every guest, every detail of the $70,000 celebration I'm supposedly paying for but not allowed to attend. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. That's not illegal. The property boundaries are clearly marked, and there are several public access points with clear sight lines to the garden area where most ceremonies are held. You photographed there before. Last spring. A May wedding. The bride's ex-husband wanted documentation for a custody hearing. Something about her lifestyle choices affecting their daughter. Vincent's smile was grim. Turned out she was serving alcohol to minors at the reception. Lost joint custody. And you're comfortable with this kind of work? Teresa, I've watched too many good people get trampled by selfish ones. If I can help someone protect themselves or get the truth, then yes, I'm very comfortable with it. She pulled out her own phone, scrolling through her calendar. October 15th, you said. Yes, but Vincent, there's more. I told her about my conversation with Christine Slaughter, about the payments that weren't coming, about the house of cards that was about to collapse around Brittany's perfect day. Vincent listened without interruption, her expression growing more amazed with each detail. So when you don't pay, there won't be a wedding. At least not the wedding she's planned. The question is whether she'll find a way to salvage something smaller, more modest, or if she'll have to postpone entirely. Either way, you want it documented. I want proof of the consequences of her choices. Not for revenge, well, not only for revenge, but for my own peace of mind. I need to see that actions have consequences, even for people who think they're above them. Vincent nodded slowly. I understand. And honestly, after what she put you through, what she's putting you through now, I think you're being remarkably restrained. There's something else, I continued. After the wedding, or whatever happens instead of the wedding, I suspect there will be fallout. Phone calls, visits, attempts at manipulation or guilt-tripping. I want you to teach me how to document things properly. Audio, video, written records. I want a complete archive of how she handles not getting her way. You're building a case. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. I met her eyes steadily. I've spent 30 years prioritizing my daughter's feelings over my own dignity. That ends now. But I want to do this smart, not just angry. Vincent reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Teresa, I want you to know something. What happened between Brittany and me in high school? It wasn't really about sophistication or social climbing. She told people that my family wasn't good enough for her because my dad was just a mechanic and my mom cleaned houses. I felt my heart clench. Vincent, I'm so sorry. Don't be. Because you know what? When I graduated valedictorian and got a full scholarship to art school, you were at the ceremony cheering louder than my own parents. You brought me flowers and told me how proud you were. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Brittany didn't even acknowledge it happened. The memory came flooding back. 17-year-old Vincent in her cap and gown, radiant with achievement, while Brittany sulked in the car because the ceremony was boring and she was missing a pool party. I'd been so proud of Vincent, so disappointed in my daughter's selfishness. You remember that? I remember everything about that day. It was the first time an adult had ever told me I was worthy of celebration just for being myself. Not for how I could serve them or what I could do for them, but just for existing and trying my best. Vincent squeezed my hand. So yes, Teresa, I'll help you document your daughter's wedding, and I'll teach you everything I know about protecting yourself from people who think love is a transaction. We spent another hour planning logistics, discussing camera angles and legal boundaries, contingency plans for different scenarios. Vincent showed me apps for recording phone calls, techniques for documenting interactions, ways to create an unshakable record of events. As we prepared to leave, she pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. This is my personal cell. Day or night, Teresa, if things get ugly after the wedding, if she tries to corner you or manipulate you, you call me immediately. Okay. I tucked the card into my wallet next to the photo of Brittany I'd been carrying for 20 years. The one from her high school graduation where she was smiling genuinely for once. Looking at it now, I realized I'd been mourning the wrong person. The daughter in that photo had been dying by degrees for years, replaced by someone who measured love in dollar signs and saw family as an inconvenience. Vincent, I said as we stood to leave, do you ever regret losing Brittany's friendship? She considered this for a moment, then shook her head. I regret who she chose to become, but losing her friendship? No. It taught me that some people will only value you as long as you're useful to them. Better to learn that lesson early than spend your whole life being used. Walking to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not just because I had an ally now, but because I'd remembered what it felt like to be valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. Vincent saw me not as a checkbook or a source of guilt or obligation, but as a person worthy of respect and loyalty. For the first time since opening that invoice, I smiled without bitterness. Brittany thought she'd found a way to extract money from me while keeping me at arm's length. Instead, she'd given me something far more valuable, absolute clarity about who she really was and who I intended to become. The phone call started 3 days after my meeting with Christine Slaughter. Not from Brittany, that would have required her to acknowledge that I was a person rather than an ATM, but from Wayne, her husband-to-be. His voice on my answering machine was tight with barely controlled panic. Teresa, it's Wayne. We need to talk. There seems to be some confusion about the wedding payments. Call me back as soon as possible. I didn't call back. Instead, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea, listening to the message play 3 more times. Each repetition revealed new layers of desperation beneath his attempted authority. Wayne Green had always struck me as the kind of man who solved problems by throwing money at them or delegating them to someone else. Now he was discovering that some problems couldn't be bought or delegated away. The second message came that evening. Teresa, this is getting ridiculous. Brittany is beside herself. The wedding is in 2 weeks. You need to call us back and sort this out. By the 4th day, Brittany herself finally condescended to contact me. Her voice was ice wrapped in silk, every word precisely enunciated like she was speaking to a difficult child. Mother, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it stops now. Our wedding planner says you're refusing to honor your commitments. This is my wedding day we're talking about. My once-in-a-lifetime moment. Whatever petty grievance you're nursing needs to take a back seat to what's important here. I played the message twice, marveling at her ability to make herself the victim in a situation where she'd tried to extort $70,000 from someone she'd excluded from her wedding. No acknowledgement of the invoice's cruelty. No recognition that she'd never actually asked me to contribute. Just outrage that I wasn't complying with her assumptions. Vincent called that afternoon to check in. How are you holding up, Teresa? I saw the venue this morning. They're still setting up for Saturday, but I heard the staff talking. Apparently, several vendors are demanding payment up front now instead of waiting until the event. Good, I said, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. Let her scramble. Let her learn what it feels like when other people's cooperation isn't guaranteed. There's something else. I was photographing an engagement session at the park near your old house yesterday, and I ran into Randy Pelosi. Remember him? He used to live 3 doors down from you. I remembered Randy, a sweet man whose husband had died young, leaving him to raise 2 sons alone. We'd bonded over morning coffee and the challenges of single parenthood after Richard's death. He asked about you, Vincent continued. When I told him what was happening with Brittany's wedding, he got this look on his face. Turns out he works for the catering company that's supposed to handle the reception. My heart stopped. What did he say? He said Brittany has been an absolute nightmare to deal with, screaming at servers during the tasting, demanding changes to the menu at the last minute, treating everyone like servants. But here's the interesting part. She paused. He also said the catering bill is $12,000, and they haven't seen a penny yet. They're one of the vendors expecting payment from you. According to Randy, yes. Brittany told them her mother was covering all the major expenses and would settle up on the wedding day. Vincent paused. Randy wanted me to give you a message. What message? He said to tell you that if you decide not to pay, he'll make sure the kitchen staff knows exactly why there's no reception dinner. He said after the way Brittany treated his people, they'd probably volunteer to cater your next birthday party for free. I found myself laughing, actually laughing for the first time in weeks. The image of my daughter's carefully curated guest list discovering that their elegant dinner had been cancelled because the bride had assumed she could bully money out of her uninvited mother was almost too perfect. Vincent, do you think I'm being too cruel? The question surprised me as it came out. Part of me, the part that had spent 30 years making excuses for Brittany's behavior, still whispered that I was the villain in this story. Teresa, do you know what cruel would be? Cruel would be showing up at the wedding uninvited and making a scene. Cruel would be posting the invoice on social media for everyone to see. Cruel would be contacting her friends and telling them what kind of person she really is. Vincent's voice was firm. You're not doing any of those things. You're simply refusing to be extorted. There's nothing cruel about setting boundaries. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I cooked myself a real dinner. Not the sad sandwiches or microwaved meals that had sustained me through the worst of my grief, but an actual meal with vegetables and seasoning and care. I set the table with my good china, the set Richard and I had received as a wedding gift and saved for special occasions that never seemed to come. As I ate, I thought about all the dinners I'd cooked for Brittany over the years. Birthday dinners where she complained about the menu. Holiday meals where she'd criticize my cooking while helping herself to seconds. Family gatherings where I'd spend hours in the kitchen while she held court in the living room, accepting compliments on the meal she hadn't helped prepare. When had I stopped mattering in my own kitchen? When had I become the invisible woman who produced comfort and abundance for others while eating scraps of affection in return? My phone rang as I was clearing the dishes. The caller ID showed Wayne's number, but it was Brittany's voice that greeted me when I answered. Mother, finally. We need to meet tonight. Hello, Brittany. How are you? How am I? Her voice pitched higher. I'm dealing with a crisis because my mother has apparently lost her mind. The wedding is in 8 days, and you're playing games with vendors and causing chaos for no reason. I'm not playing games, sweetheart. I'm simply not paying for a wedding I wasn't invited to. The silence stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. When Brittany finally spoke, her voice was deadly quiet. You weren't invited because we knew you'd make it about yourself. We knew you'd find some way to cause drama or make everyone uncomfortable with your situation. Living in that tiny apartment, wearing clothes from discount stores, talking about money problems all the time. Wayne's family has a certain standard, and frankly, we weren't sure you could blend in appropriately. The words hit like physical blows, but instead of pain, I felt something crystalline and sharp settle in my chest. Clarity. Perfect, merciless clarity. I see, I said calmly. So you excluded me from your wedding because I might embarrass you, but you still expected me to pay for it. This is what I'm talking about, Brittany snapped. You're twisting everything around, making it sound worse than it is. We thought it would be easier for everyone if you contributed financially instead of attending. Easier for who, exactly? For everyone. For you, too. You wouldn't have to worry about what to wear or whether you fit in. You could still be part of the day without the stress of actually being there. I closed my eyes, remembering the little girl who used to climb into my lap when she was scared, who used to tell me I was the most beautiful mommy in the world. Somewhere along the way, that child had been replaced by this stranger who saw me as a source of embarrassment and funding. Brittany, I said softly, do you hear yourself right now? What do you mean? You're telling me that you excluded me from one of the most important days of your life because you think I'm not good enough to be seen with you. But you still want my money. It's not about the money. It's exactly about the money. You sent me a $70,000 invoice, Brittany. Not a request, not a conversation. A bill with a note telling me I should feel lucky to be allowed to contribute. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted to the wheedling tone she'd used as a teenager when she wanted something. Look, I know the invoice was poorly worded. I was stressed, and maybe I didn't express myself well. But you're my mother. This is my wedding. Don't you want to see me happy? I want to see you become a person I can be proud of. Someone who treats others with kindness and respect. Someone who values relationships over transactions. I took a deep breath. But that's not who you are right now, is it? You're being ridiculous. Emotional. This is exactly why we thought it would be better if you weren't there. Then you should be relieved that I won't be paying either. I hung up before she could respond, my hand surprisingly steady as I set the phone down. Within seconds, it started ringing again. I turned off the ringer and watched the screen light up with call after call. Wayne, then Brittany, then Wayne again. Finally, a text message appeared, "You're destroying my wedding out of spite. I hope you're happy." I typed back slowly, carefully, "I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply not funding it. There's a difference." Her response came immediately, "Same thing." And there it was. In Brittany's mind, my refusal to pay for her wedding was equivalent to sabotage. My boundaries were acts of aggression. My dignity was an inconvenience she shouldn't have to consider. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked to my bedroom window. Outside, the October night was crisp and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. Somewhere out there, vendors were realizing they wouldn't be paid. A wedding planner was probably working frantically to salvage what she could. A bride was discovering that her assumptions about other people's compliance had been catastrophically wrong. And I was standing in my own space, in my own life, finally free of the obligation to fund someone else's dreams while being excluded from their love. October 15th dawned gray and cold, with the kind of persistent drizzle that soaks through everything. I stood at my kitchen window, watching water streak down the glass, and wondered if Brittany was awake yet, discovering what remained of her perfect day. Vincent had texted me at 6 in the morning, "Venue looks chaotic. Vendor trucks leaving already. Still want me there?" I'd replied immediately, "Yes. Document everything." By 10 o'clock, my phone had recorded 17 missed calls from various numbers. Wayne, Brittany, even Christine Slaughter. I'd turned off the ringer after the 5th call and spent the morning in deliberate calm, organizing my financial documents and cleaning my apartment. If Brittany decided to escalate this situation legally, I wanted every record of my independence meticulously documented. The doorbell rang at 11:30. Through the peephole, I saw Brittany standing in the hallway, still in her pajamas with a coat thrown over them, her usually perfect hair unwashed and wild. Wayne stood behind her, looking like a man who'd been up all night negotiating with creditors. I opened the door but didn't step aside to let them in. "Mother." Brittany's voice was hoarse, probably from crying or shouting. "We need to talk." "Good morning, Brittany." "Wayne." I kept my tone pleasant, professional. "You look upset." "Upset?" Brittany's composure, always her strongest weapon, finally cracked completely. "My wedding is ruined. The caterers showed up this morning demanding $12,000 in cash or they were leaving. The florist took back all the arrangements. The photographer says we still owe him $8,000 for the engagement photos, and he won't shoot the ceremony until we pay." "That sounds very stressful," I said calmly. "What does this have to do with me?" Wayne stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Cut the act, Teresa. You know exactly what this has to do with you. You're deliberately sabotaging our wedding because you didn't get your invitation." "I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm simply not paying for your wedding. Those are two very different things." "Same outcome," Brittany snarled, and I was startled by how ugly her face looked when she wasn't performing perfection. "Do you have any idea what this is costing us? Not just money, reputation. Wayne's family is already at the hotel. My friends flew in from 3 different states. Everyone is asking what happened, why everything is falling apart." "What are you telling them?" "The truth," Wayne said coldly. "That Brittany's mother decided to punish her by pulling funding at the last minute." "Is that the truth?" "Because the truth, as I understand it, is that you planned a wedding you couldn't afford, assumed I would pay for it without asking me, and are now dealing with the consequences of those assumptions." Brittany's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, not the calculated performances I'd witnessed throughout her adolescence. "Please, Mom. I'm begging you. I know I handled this wrong. I know the invoice was insensitive, but this is my wedding day. Can't we figure out the rest later?" For a moment, looking at my daughter's tear-streaked face, I felt the familiar pull of maternal guilt. The voice in my head that whispered, "Just fix it. Just make her happy. Just keep the peace." It would be so easy to write the check, to smooth over this crisis, to return to the familiar pattern of my pain being less important than her comfort. But then I remembered the invoice, the casual cruelty of that note, the assumption that I should feel lucky to be financially useful while being socially disposable. "Brittany," I said gently, "what would happen if I wrote you a check right now?" Her face lit up with desperate hope. "Everything could still work out. We could call the vendors back, explain that it was just a misunderstanding." "And then what? After the wedding, after the honeymoon, what do you expect me to fund next? What happens to our relationship?" She blinked, clearly not understanding the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, would I be invited to your first anniversary dinner? Would I be welcome at your house for holidays? Would you call me just to talk, not because you need something?" I watched her face as the implications sank in. "Or would I go back to being the embarrassing mother you keep at arm's length until the next time you need money?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Wayne shifted uncomfortably, and I realized he was finally understanding the deeper dynamics at play here. "That's not. This isn't about." Brittany struggled for words. "You're my mother. Of course you'd be part of our lives. The way I've been part of your life for the past 3 years. Seeing you twice a year, always at your convenience, always with the understanding that I shouldn't expect too much or ask for too much or take up too much space." "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest, something I should have been years ago." I looked at Wayne, whose discomfort was becoming more apparent by the minute. Did you know, Wayne, that Brittany hasn't visited my apartment once in the 3 years I've lived here? She sends me Christmas cards addressed to Teresa Mack instead of Mom. She's never asked how I'm doing financially or emotionally since her father died. Wayne's eyes widened slightly. I could see him recalculating, wondering what other aspects of his fiancée's character he might have overlooked. But she still expected me to fund her fairy tale wedding, I continued. $70,000 from a woman living on a widow's pension and Social Security. $70,000 from someone not worthy of an invitation to the event she was supposed to finance. Mother, stop. Brittany's voice was broken now, all her sophistication stripped away. Just stop. You know what, sweetheart? You're right. I am stopping. I'm stopping the pattern where your needs matter more than my dignity. I'm stopping the assumption that my love for you obligates me to accept your contempt. I'm stopping the cycle where I pay for the privilege of being treated like an inconvenience. My phone buzzed with a text from Vincent, wedding officially cancelled. Venue staff confirming with guests. Some people asking questions about what really happened. I glanced at the message, then looked back at my daughter. It appears your wedding has been officially cancelled. Brittany's sob was raw, animal-like. She collapsed against Wayne, who wrapped his arms around her with the mechanical gesture of someone going through motions he didn't fully understand. This could have been avoided so easily, I continued, my voice still calm. A phone call, a conversation, even just basic politeness in how you approached me. But you chose to send an invoice with a note designed to make me feel grateful for the opportunity to be used. What do you want from me? Brittany's voice was muffled against Wayne's shoulder. What will it take to fix this? I want you to understand something, I said. This isn't about the money. It's about respect. It's about basic human decency. It's about treating your mother like a person instead of a resource. I can learn. Can you? Because this isn't new behavior, Brittany. This is who you've been for years. The only difference is that this time there are consequences. Wayne cleared his throat. Teresa, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I interrupted. Just a daughter who thought she could have her cake and eat it too. Who thought she could exclude me from her life while keeping access to my wallet. I stepped back and began to close the door. I hope you both learned something today. I hope your next wedding, if there is one, is built on honesty and respect instead of assumptions and entitlement. Wait. Brittany pushed away from Wayne, her face desperate. What if we postponed everything? Planned a smaller wedding, one we could actually afford. What if I invited you properly this time? I paused with my hand on the door. And why would you want to do that? Because you're my mother, she said, as if that explained everything. Am I? Or am I just someone you share DNA with who occasionally proves useful? I met her eyes steadily. Answer honestly, Brittany. If I couldn't contribute financially to your life, would you want me in it at all? The fact that she had to think about it told me everything I needed to know. I thought so, I said softly. Goodbye, Brittany. I hope someday you figure out the difference between loving someone and using them. I closed the door and engaged the deadbolt, then leaned against it, listening to their voices in the hallway. Wayne's low, urgent tones, Brittany's broken sobs. After 10 minutes, I heard footsteps moving away, then the ding of the elevator. My phone rang immediately. Vincent's number. Teresa, I just saw them leave your building. Are you okay? I'm perfect, I said, and realized I meant it. How did the documentation go? Comprehensive. Vendors leaving, guests being turned away. A very public meltdown in the parking lot. I got it all. Vincent paused. There's something else, though. About an hour ago, I got a call from someone named Kayla Waters. She said you'd given her my number. I did. What did she want? She wants to hire me to photograph her 50th wedding anniversary party next month. Apparently, she's been telling everyone about my work. Vincent's voice was warm with excitement. Teresa, I think you might have just changed my life too. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the October afternoon. The rain had stopped, and thin sunlight was breaking through the clouds. Somewhere across town, my daughter was learning that actions have consequences. Somewhere else, vendors were explaining to their next clients why contracts exist. And here in my small, clean apartment, I was learning what it felt like to value myself enough to demand respect. But my phone rang again before I could fully savor the moment. Unknown number. Mrs. Mack. The voice was unfamiliar, professional. This is Detective Sarah Morrison with the White Plains Police Department. I'm calling because we've received a report of elder financial abuse. Your daughter has filed a complaint stating that you've stolen money intended for her wedding and are holding it hostage to manipulate her. She's provided documentation showing that you agreed to pay for certain wedding expenses and are now refusing to honor those commitments. My blood ran cold. I'm sorry, what? Ma'am, I need you to understand that elder financial abuse is a serious crime. If you've taken money that belongs to your daughter or agreed to payments you're now withholding as a form of emotional manipulation, that could constitute a felony. I'd like to schedule a time for you to come in and provide your side of the story. I sank into my kitchen chair, staring at the invoice still on my counter where I'd left it as evidence. Detective Morrison, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. I never agreed to pay for anything. In fact, I wasn't even invited to the wedding. Ma'am, your daughter has provided us with a signed agreement showing your commitment to cover the major wedding expenses. She also has witness statements from the wedding planner and several vendors confirming that you were the designated payer for these services. My hands were shaking now. A signed agreement. Detective, I never signed anything. I received an invoice demanding payment, but I never agreed to anything. Mrs. Mack, I'm going to need you to come in tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Bring any documentation you have regarding this matter. And ma'am, you might want to consider bringing a lawyer. The line went dead, and I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone in disbelief. Brittany hadn't just assumed I would pay for her wedding. She'd apparently forged documents to make it look like I'd agreed to it, and now she was using the police to try to force me into compliance. I called Vincent immediately. Teresa. What's wrong? You sound terrible. Vincent, I need every piece of documentation you have from today. Photos, recordings, everything. Brittany has told the police that I've stolen money from her and am holding it hostage. She's apparently forged documents to make it look like I agreed to pay for the wedding. Jesus Christ. That's fraud, Teresa. She's committing fraud to frame you for elder abuse. I know. I have to be at the police station tomorrow morning at 9. They told me to bring a lawyer. Okay, listen to me. Don't panic. We have everything we need to prove your innocence. The timeline of events, the invoice, your meetings with the wedding planner, all of it supports your version of what happened. But Teresa. Yes. Your daughter just crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. She's not just trying to manipulate you anymore. She's trying to destroy you. Are you prepared for that fight? I looked around my small apartment, at the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage, at the independence I'd fought so hard to maintain. Outside, the October sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Yes, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. I think I've been preparing for this fight my whole life. I just didn't know it until now. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Not just in my apartment, but in my own skin, fighting for my own dignity. And tomorrow, I would show my daughter, and the world, exactly what happened when you mistook a mother's love for weakness.